Hello, and welcome to The Queer Gaze, a gay movie podcast dedicated to examining queer representation and issues.
We're continuing our theme HIV and AIDS with our third entry in the origins and stigma phase, Roger Spottiswoode's And the Band Played On. If you want to hear more of the discussion, including our sad hanky award, please support The Queer Gaze at patreon.com/thequeergaze.
You'll also get early access to regular main feed episodes and extra content for every single episode.
And you can follow us on social media at The Queer Gaze.
All right, so Mr. Conrad, are you ready to get deeply historical?
Yes, indeed. And to watch scientists try to figure something out over the course of 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Woo, this is a long one, and I'm not going to lie, when it started, I thought we were watching Outbreak.
I did too. I was waiting for Gwyneth Paltrow to drop dead on her kitchen floor.
Oh my god, that's Contagion.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm thinking of the wrong single title pandemic movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's what this feels like, right? It truly does feel almost like not a conspiracy thriller, but a medical thriller of that genre.
Yeah, that's the thing that's most interesting about it. So this is a TV movie, but crucially, it's not on network TV. It was for HBO in 1993, and the band Played On, based on the nonfiction book by Randy Shilts, which we did talk about in Zero Patience.
Yes.
And dramatizing the early years of the AIDS epidemic as a sprawling institutional tragedy, anchored as if it could be by Matthew Modine as epidemiologist Don Francis, and supported by an astonishingly star-studded ensemble cast, including, and I'm sure we'll mention loads of others, Alan Alda, Lily Tomlin, Sir Ian McKellen, Richard Gere, and Steve Martin. The film traces the collision of science, politics, and community response as a mysterious disease devastates populations while governments and agencies quarrel. And it reframes the AIDS story as a story of systemic failure and social stigma rather than individual pathology.
Yeah. That is a very succinct and appropriate encapsulation of what we're seeing in this film. I like your use of the word sprawling as well, because this truly does feel, even though I would argue it is mostly contained to North America and the North American experience, apart from our frequent trips to France, because of course we also have to talk about infighting among scientists who want to claim credit, which was to me the most frustrating part of this. I was like, how about you just fucking help people instead of try to get published in Science? Oh, wait, that's where all the grant money is. Never mind. But I do appreciate that this feels like a very different kind of HIV and AIDS text. Like, sure, we get a couple of people who look very sad and they are dying and there's hospitals and that kind of stuff. But it doesn't feel like we're going necessarily for the emotional heartstrings in terms of, isn't it such a tragedy? It's very much, you should be pissed off about this tragedy.
Very much so. And it's interesting because, I mean, it casts its net wide. As a result, the characterization is fairly shallow, just because there's not really much it can do. So you get a lot of vignettes. So presumably we could argue that you get lots of different representations of both queer characters and the straight people who are trying to help these poor waifs who are slowly wasting away, rather than just, like an early Frost, where the story is centered on the straight white middle class family coming to terms with this tragedy that is happening to them, whilst the other thing is sort of very much in the background.
Right.
This, I think, sort of levels the playing field a little bit more in terms of representation. It's quite interesting to see some depictions of not necessarily sexual activity, but certainly intimacy, certainly sort of the social life of queer people in some of the cities that it depicts.
Yes, we do spend a lot of time principally in San Francisco. That seems to be one of the battlegrounds where we really waged war. And it was fascinating to see. I think we don't call them ACT UP, but it's a sort of local version of ACT UP where it's made up of doctors as well as political figures and community leaders and that kind of stuff. But most of the action in San Francisco is centered around the decision of whether or not to close the bathhouses, because we've been able to trace the fact that it does seem to be spreading through sexual contact from men in those specific areas.
Yeah, now the thing that I found most interesting that I wanted to get a read on you from is the representation of the queer community in this, because they seem very, or at least the way some groups that are depicted in the film are very resistant to the idea of the bathhouses being closed, because they feel it is a representation of their sexual freedom.
Yes.
And that in closing them, they are being forced back into the closet again. This idea that suggesting that one of the main vectors of the disease is sex is in itself rejected by some angry people in town hall meetings and so on. And I mean, I don't want to say that there isn't other representations of queer people, but I mean, this does have the whole patient zero Gaetan Dugas character.
Yep.
Very dodgy French accent. Being very cavalier and not perhaps the sort of sociopathic, almost serial killer that he was apparently depicted as in some sort of television program at the time when the book was just about to come out. But I don't know, I came away from it with an overall impression that the queer people who were represented were resistant themselves to doing anything that would have stopped the spread of the, or curtailed the spread of the disease and protected people, or crucially themselves, which made me feel a little bit concerned that this wasn't a terribly helpful portrayal or accurate.
I can't speak to the accuracy, although having lived through a pandemic, I think we can both appreciate that there are a bunch of well-intentioned and or well-meaning people who will say and do the absolute wrong thing, particularly when it comes at a personal cost to them. So I wouldn't be surprised, unfortunately, but I did also latch on to that one specific line where during this town hall in San Francisco, where we're really saying, well, what evidence do you have of this stuff? The CDC just got up and said one thing. And of course, the CDC wanted to hedge their bets because they don't feel that they have enough scientific evidence to make a formal recommendation that, like, yes, it's transmitted sexually. Yes, we should stop engaging in certain types of maybe riskier behavior. But I really like that one person who says, you're trying to put us back into the closet because, you know, one of the things that I think you and I have danced around occasionally on our discussions on this podcast is, what does good queer representation look like? And sometimes that means I want to see people fucking. I want to see them being intimate with people, because that is unfortunately one of the biggest distinguishing characteristics of queer people is like, we don't sleep with the same people as heteros. And I like its inclusion here, even though I do take your point that, yeah, there does seem to be this friction where you're like, okay, well, you seem to be conflating sexual liberty and freedom with the fact that all of your fucking friends are dying, and you want the government to step in, and you want them to provide guidelines and advice and to stop people from getting sick. And it felt like that was where the tension lied for me, is people feeling like they didn't have enough information to make an informed decision. So they fall back on this, oh, well, the government is trying to police our sexuality. So I could understand it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I'm not sure as to how accurate it is or how balanced it is.
Yeah.
Because how can you represent an entire culture in 2.5 hours?
Yes, and it's a lot to negotiate. Even just trying to keep notes for this movie was a challenge, where I was like, who are these people? What is their name? You know, half the time I was referring to the actor as opposed to the character, because it was just like, who? You know, Bill Collins speaking on behalf of all the bathhouse owners in that particular scene. Sure, okay.
Yeah, that's a thing that happens in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing that I did find in my scouring of information on this is apparently there was a bit of a fracas in the editing room.
Okay.
Over inclusion of representations of queer characters. Apparently, Randy Shilts himself, who was unfortunately dying at this point in the production.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so he was concerned about the inclusion of some of the stock footage from the Pride Parade.
Okay.
And apparently the director was saying, well, it's stock footage. This actually happened. So I'm not sort of misrepresenting anything in any way. But
well,
he was concerned that there was too much focus on the more stereotypically flamboyant or salacious, the bathhouses,
right.
Elements that wouldn't necessarily give a very balanced view of gay life.
You could just say it, Conrad. It would alarm the straight people because it was a little too sexually coded.
Yeah, exactly. So they went back and did a bit of a reshoot, apparently, with Sir Ian McKellen and BD Wong, just to show a couple in what would be recognizable as a relationship for the straights to latch on to. It's like, oh, look, they have breakfast just like us,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
They don't seem to be fucking other people until BD Wong says, I can't be with you any longer and I've met someone new.
Yeah, so just like a straight relationship, he's gone and cheated on him. Yeah, but I was particularly taken by a quote during this struggle over the editing, where apparently HBO was starting to cut things out and Roger Spottiswoode was getting very angry about it, insisting they put it all back in. According to HBO, Matthew Modine wrote to them to claim that HBO was, quote, letting gays escape any blame for avoiding responsible behavior.
Oh, God. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, here's the thing. I'm glad to have this conversation, if for no other reason than I think that it was a serious issue for a lot of folks. Like, I imagine it would have been top of mind in the dialogue. And we kind of see that when we start to escalate things to higher level committee meetings where you've got like the people who are representing the hemophiliacs and all of the people who have gotten infected from contaminated blood. Like, that's really where the last act of the film starts to go, because you realize there's a bunch of people who really didn't care that queer people were dying in huge numbers because it didn't affect them. But all of a sudden, once you started to say, oh, well, you as a straight person or you as a conservative suburbanite could also get this depending on your medical situation. Like, I understand how the film needed to negotiate that politicization. And I think it also is trying to do the same thing with like, well, if you were celibate during this time period, your chances of catching this disease were basically nil. But there were people like Patient Zero, folks who are just listening and not watching this video. I'm using air quotes or scare quotes because we don't need to ever blame people for their own illnesses. But the reality is that there were a lot of people who continued to engage in risky behavior. And for some of them, it did end up catching up to them. And I think the film is trying to balance that depiction where it's like, if you didn't go to the bathhouse, you were less likely to get infected. But you also have to be very careful not to suggest, oh, well, these people did it to themselves. They should have just been celibate for, what, a decade plus? Like, nobody even knew how long this was going to last.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it does come off as victim blaming. That's certainly one of the accusations that was leveled on the film afterwards. The thing that I find most interesting about it, though, is that ultimately the villain of the piece, the disinterest in doing anything about this, it turns out to be fairly dispassionate. Like, it's not interested in whether you're queer or whether you're a haemophiliac. It's just purely interested in money.
Mm-hmm.
the bottom line is that nobody wants to spend any money. It is a common thread throughout the whole thing. The CDC in Atlanta seems to have no money, scratching money
Yeah.
to get them to buy a test tube. It's no funding. They're having to scratch funds from other places.
Yeah.
All of the blood banks don't want to do anything about testing the blood because it would just be financially unfeasible. So we know a proportion of our blood is contaminated. We're just going to let it through. So when push comes to shove, it's not discriminating.
Yeah.
It's just heartless profiteering at any cost.
And I like that we get a number of different sound bites that reinforce that idea. One of the scientists, I can't remember which one, basically says, this disease will not discriminate. It will go after anybody. It's not about a gay disease. It's not about killing off F-slurs and so on. But I found that one scene where Swoosie Kurtz shows up. So basically they discover in order to change the blood services people's mind, they need someone who cannot be denied because they are too rich and powerful. So they go to this woman who has been infected because she had heart surgery and she got infected with tainted blood. And she keeps getting sick, Conrad. She keeps catching all of these new things, and her doctors just keep asking her to lay on the beautiful fainting couch in her McMansion. And no one has told her that she is ill. So this is Mrs. Johnstone. And I thought it was a really powerful scene because you just see her and her husband, who are incredibly wealthy people, look at each other, realize what their lives are going to be like now that she's most certainly going to die. And it's like, so they knew they did this to us. And you're just like, yeah, get them.
Yeah. Welcome to capitalism. You are now victims of it rather than beneficiaries.
Yeah. But I'm curious. Okay, so do you agree with that claim? Do you think that the movie itself is blaming certain people, or is it just casting that broad net of, oh, yeah, it's capitalism? Because I won't deny, I left being really mad at Alan Alda's character.
Oh, God. Yeah, it's a fascinating one, isn't it? He apparently signed on. I think there was like a domino effect. Apparently according to Sir McKellen, apparently after Richard Gere signed on, he was the first one to stick his head above the parapet.
Okay.
And say, I don't care, I'm taking union scale, I'm just going to do this movie. Right. And then everybody else jumped on board as well.
Okay.
And Alan Alda wanted to play an arsehole because he'd never played an arsehole before. And boy, is he an arsehole.
Oh my God. Yeah. This is Dr. Gallo. So he's the person who claims to have discovered the AIDS virus first. So he wants to publish on it. And then he makes an agreement with the French colleagues who really discovered it. And then he's like, well, we'll publish at the same time, or we'll present at the same time. And he does this press conference where he doesn't name them. And then they threatened to sue him. And it is really interesting because, again, I think it's very reflective of just how much power and money and prestige are associated with the science elements of it, right? Like the CDC, where they basically don't even have a lab. Like they put Matthew Modine in a fucking closet where shit falls on him. And they're like, please help us find as much as we can out about this. And then meanwhile, Dr. Gallo is like, oh, well, I suppose I could make nice with the French people. I'm going to a conference in Switzerland, so I'll just swing by Paris later. And you're like, you're an asshole. You're a dick, and I hate you. But it takes a dressing down from Matthew Modine to basically say, shouldn't you care about the people? And we hear that a lot, right? It's, you don't care about the people, you only care about the profit.
Yeah, he has the sort of killer line that I'm sure was played over and over again when he was nominated for an Emmy. But I think they did get 3 Primetime Emmys in the end, though. But I think it was mainly in the sort of technical categories. Yeah. So what do you think of Matthew Modine, aside from Alan Alda? I mean, I think you're absolutely, to close the loop on that, I absolutely think you're right that he does come out as an example of academia and pride and ego at its absolute worst. So you have dispassionate, cold-hearted capitalism. You've got academics, elitists at their absolute worst. What do you think of our knight in shining lab coat, Matthew Modine as Don?
I love the hair. The hair game is great. I think that Matthew Modine is a fine actor. If anything, he's an audience surrogate, right? He's the proxy stand-in for us, where he kind of runs around and he gets really mad at people and he wants to do the right thing. And he helps to connect a bunch of different branches of this very sprawling story. It's a thankless role, though, right? Like, nobody really gets to pop, to the point where I thought, oh, well, I'm actually kind of glad it's Matthew Modine because I don't have incredibly strong feelings about him as an actor. You know, I was kind of mad because I'm a really big fan of Glenn Headley and I wanted her to get more to do. But it's just one of those types of movies where, I mean, we mentioned Outbreak is not the right comparison for this, but Contagion, where we just stack the deck with really famous people and everybody gets about 5 minutes of something interesting to do. And you just hope that yours is the 5 most interesting minutes.
Yeah.
I take it you were not a fan.
Not hugely. I've always found him terribly bland and sort of the actor that you go to if you can't get Kevin Costner or Kevin Kline or one of the other Kevins in the 90s.
All the Kevins in the 90s, yeah.
Yeah, the hair is wonderful. That's what I tended to think of Matthew Modine. He's just some hair. And I think less of him having read that quote about that.
Oh, that's a terrible quote. Shut your mouth. What are you even doing? Why are you making this movie if you truly feel that way? But okay.
Yeah. I'm sure he probably wishes he were more nuanced and empathetic now. But
yeah,
in any case, you're right. It is a thankless role thinking about it. And there isn't an awful lot you can do with it. And I do believe his character. I mean, he's basically one note throughout the whole thing. I think for me, what undermines it is the film rather than him, which is those goddamn flashbacks to the Ebola victims.
Oh my God. I understand what they're trying to do, and I appreciate it because so few of these people are actually characters. Like, they don't really get arcs because they're stand-ins for, yes, real people for the most part, but also this is a movie about systemic issues, right? And injustices being fought along the lines of capitalism and the way that procedures just remove the humanity out of things. So it's hard to make these into real people. And I appreciate that the film is saying, oh, well, he's continually informed by this traumatic experience he had when he was dealing with Ebola just a couple of years before. But God damn, if every fucking time we don't get to one of them, I was like, stop it with the Ebola flashbacks.
Yeah, a fun little anecdote for you. Another little quote I got from the Ian McKellen reminiscences I found. He was saying, well, according to Armistead Maupin, Sir Ian McKellen said that an executive was on the set during his domestic scene with B.D. Wong and insisted that they not kiss because although he personally didn't have any objection to it...
I have a black friend.
Yeah, exactly. He needed to make sure that the audience wasn't grossed out. At which point, Sir Ian McKellen pointed out that the movie opened with an Ebola victim puking blood on the camera.
Yeah. Yeah, your priorities are maybe a little messed up if that's your issue.
Yeah, quite. That might be apocryphal, but...
Oh, jeez.
Yeah,
okay, well, how about we take our conversation over to Patreon so we can talk about some of these other celebrity cameos and maybe some of the questionable music and editing choices in this film? Because when you mentioned Richard Gere, I definitely thought of a couple of moments that took me out. But folks, I'm going to encourage you to join us over there. So as we mentioned off the top, it's about $3 a month. You get bonus episodes for every single episode, including this here one. Don't you want to hear about the moment that made Conrad cry? It probably didn't happen because he's emotionless and a robot. But
no, this film got me at one point.
Did it? Okay, fantastic. Cool. Then I will take that back and admit I'm an asshole. But if you want to join us, it's patreon.com/thequeergaze. If you don't or you can't, that's totally fine. We will be back here in a couple of weeks so that we can talk about the ultimate AIDS narrative from the 90s. We're going to be talking about Philadelphia next, which is the exact same year as this film. And if you have big thoughts about And the Band Played On, if you want to correct us on anything, you can reach out on the socials at The Queer Gaze, or you can shoot us an email at thequeergazeshow@gmail.com. Yeah. But until then, I guess watch a sad gay movie. You know what? Watch a happy gay movie, just to course correct.
Yeah.